Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming, guys, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on Rumble. Before I go to today's guest, I just want to make a disclaimer and a note that if you're following me on Telegram channel of Syriana Analysis, I do not contact you personally. There is no way that I would contact you personally. There is no way that I would ask you to send me any type of cryptos or non-cryptos or anything else. So if anyone is contacting you privately or trying to persuade you in the group that send me a crypto or join this group or that, this is a fake account. I'm trying to block them all the time, but spams are full on, unfortunately, on Telegram. So just be careful. Do not communicate with these people, guys. And I'm very, very happy today to have Taylor Hudak with me. Today, we are going to speak about so many topics, actually. And when I was trying to prepare this conversation, I thought that in an increasingly digital world, the future is unfortunately fraught with the potential for censorship and state surveillance. Therefore, I wanted to host Taylor Hudak as we explore the terrifying possibilities of a world where our every move is monitored and also potentially controlled. From government surveillance to online censorship, we delve into the risks and implications of living in a society where privacy is a thing of a past. Taylor, thank you so much for being with me today on Syriana Analysis. You're a journalist with the Last American Vagabond and acTVism. The acTVism here is TVism, acTVism, guys, acTVism Munich, and a contributor to CHD Europe. It's a really pleasure to have you on Syriana Analysis.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I hope you're doing well in Hungary, and Hungary is treating you well as well. Many people speak about Hungary badly here in Germany, and you have a different opinion about Hungary. What made you move to Hungary, actually?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I am obviously an American, spent the majority of my life in the United States. And then just a few years ago, I moved to Hungary, but I'm also a dual citizen on my dad's side. His father was a Hungarian citizen. So I had a pathway to citizenship, which was great because it helps with travel. It makes it a lot easier to, stay in the EU because a lot of people don't realize this, but the American passport, in my opinion, can be quite restrictive. And it was nice to pick up another passport. And then also I grew up, learning about my Hungarian heritage. So it was nice to have the passport and then also live here. I've always been very interested in seeing beyond the world, beyond the United States. And I, took the opportunity to do so. And I just work here as an independent journalist. With this job, you can pretty much be anywhere. And I do like being well connected to the rest of the world. I feel like I can, drive just a few hours and be in a completely or somewhat different culture. And I really appreciate that. Whereas the United States is so isolated, you have these long flights, expensive flights just to get to another country for the most part. Of course, we have Mexico, to the south and also Canada, but it's just nice to be able to be somewhere where I can, have the freedom to travel a little bit more and experience more of the world. But I have to say, out of all of the EU countries, I think Hungary is doing a great job, really, in fighting against the EU agenda, the migration agenda, and also preventing, at least to some degree, the continuation of the war in Ukraine. Again, I want to make this disclaimer, though, just because, I am saying that I do appreciate some of the policies of this country, Hungary, it does not mean that I am not also critical or that I, endorse a particular candidate or political party, nothing like that. But I do appreciate that it is a country that is taking a different stance compared to, let's say, Germany or some of the other EU countries. So it's great to be here. I really enjoy it. Some people say, oh, Hungary's a dictatorship. I actually had somebody come up to me when I was covering a case a few months ago say, oh, it must be horrible living in Orban's Hungary. And I'm like, it's actually not bad at all. It's great. The one complaint I do have, though, I must say, is that we have a ridiculous sales tax here. It's like 27%. I don't know why, but it's very high compared to other countries in Europe. But it's a great place to be.
You know what I like the most about Hungary is that they follow their interests. And I respect these countries who follow their interests. Like, I don't at least try to adopt a policy that is harming my own people. I agree, for example, with Hungary's approach to vis-a-vis Russia, Ukraine. I disagree with Hungary, for example, vis-a-vis Armenia, Azerbaijan. Like, there are things that I agree with, and there are policies that I disagree with. But in Hungary, is that they are following the interests of their own people, and they are not trying to bring the globalist agenda in their countries and forcefully impose certain whether agendas, whether political projects, whether values on their people. This is what I like about Hungary, and I would really love actually to visit Hungary soon and also explore this country and interact with the people. I have hosted a few Hungarian journalists on this channel. It's really great. Like, I feel there's so many also mutual grounds between them. But you, Taylor, you are one of the few journalists. This is just my perception of you. Like, you never betrayed the journalistic ethics, and you remained critical of the mainstream narratives peddled in the press. Like, when you read a news report, when you read the news article, for example, online, or watch a commentary on any of the mainstream outlets, how do you feel like there is something suspicious and worthy of investigation? Myself, when I watch TV and when I hear these talking heads, I already feel insulted. Like, I feel like something is damaging my brain. So yourself, how do you detect these holes in the mainstream narratives and say, I need to investigate this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I would say that I look at everything that's coming out of the mainstream media quite critically. I don't want to go as far as to say that everything that they publish is a lie, but I think that the mainstream media is absolutely the right arm of the establishment. I'm not the first person to say that. A lot of people say that, but I
Mhm.
agree. It's there for a purpose. It's to continue to push the establishment narrative, in my opinion, at least in most countries. So for me, when it comes to particular stories that I find a little bit suspicious, or perhaps there's some deception going on, is if I see that all of the media at one time is repeating the same exact thing over and over
Yeah.
and over again. That either tells me that this is potentially a distraction, or there is some sort of perhaps agenda behind what they are saying. There's some motivation to get people to think in a certain way. And then it also goes back to a type of media theory. I know this is somewhat academic, but it's called agenda setting theory. And it's where the media actually has the power to influence what people think about, not how they think about it. Well, they do that too, of course, but what they think about. So when the media is all in unison, reporting on one thing in a very controlled way, where they're
Yeah.
all saying the same exact thing, that's when I become a little bit suspicious. I also, too, look at how is it this being portrayed. If there's overly positive language being used, let's say when it comes to certain pieces of legislation like the EU Media Freedom Act, and I know we'll get to that later, or for example, in the past, like the Patriot Act, to me, it's likely an indicator that it is not a good thing, and that it is not necessarily about media freedom in the case of the Media Freedom Act, or about patriotism with the Patriot
Yeah.
Act. So I think that it's just good to be overall skeptical. And just to bring it back, another point that I wanted to raise here was that when the media is hyper focused on an issue, I mentioned it could be a distraction. And there's one really good example for people to think about here, and that is for the Americans, they'll remember this, maybe Europeans not so much, but there were these hearings, Supreme Court hearings that took place for the Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. It was his hearing to be placed into the Supreme Court. So I'm not wording that correctly, but it was his hearing to be admitted into the Supreme Court. And this was around the fall of 2018. There was a hyper media focus about this issue, about him potentially assaulting a woman in his past. And it was actually during this time that and I'm looking at my notes here to make sure I get this correct,
Mm.
that the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board
Mm.
passed FASB 56, Resolution 56, which allowed for secret military and defense spending.
Wow.
So it basically allowed these agencies to then basically misrepresent their financial statements and their funding when it came to the defense of the United States. So I haven't researched into that too much, but it's just a point that I want to raise here, that while everybody was focused on this Kavanaugh hearing,
Yep.
and it was over sensationalized in the media, they were passing a very concerning resolution, FASB 56. So that's just one example of media being used to distract from really important issues.
Yes, and to be honest with you, what I also see is the scripted terminologies. When you see that the vast majority of the mainstream press, the journalists, the talking heads are using the same terminologies, like it's safe and effective. It is unprovoked invasion. It is unjustified attack from Hamas on Israel. Like it's always, there are certain terminologies that precedes the news, and this is when they are trying to engineer certain narrative and how do they want for the people to think about it, right? My wife was telling me today that she was watching one of the news, German news, and how they are portraying what's happening in Gaza, and it's like completely upside down, like as if there is nothing is happening there, and you have just a bunch of ISIS type of terrorists who want to commit genocide against the Jewish people. Like they really try to change everything in its core, right? So it's very, in my opinion, important to take whatever they say on mainstream media with face value. And I'm not saying that everything is a lie, as you mentioned, but taking it as a face value with a grain of salt, it's a good start to understand how the news work. And if you dig in a little bit more into the rabbit hole, sometimes I get like, it's not like I get crazy, but I have these moments like, wow, so these things that happened in the past and now these things are happening at the current moment, they are all interconnected. And these people were really working hard. It's not years, they're working decades in order to exert their power, pressure, and control over the rest of the population. But many journalists like yourself who investigate these holes in the mainstream narratives are often accused of being conspiracy theorists, right? And in Germany, at some point, they were called even terrorists, conspiracy terrorists. How do we draw the distinction between them? There are hardcore conspiracy theorists everywhere around the world, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the term conspiracy theorist is obviously used intentionally to discredit people. I know some people have some fun with the term. They like to use it. I don't like to use it because I think that it is, there's an intention there to discredit factual, truthful information. And we could look back through history and see many times where one piece of information was once considered to be a conspiracy theory that turned out to be absolutely true. But fortunately, I think that overall media is, or where people go to access information is changing. So especially younger people, they are not, I think, looking at mainstream media so much. They're more getting their information from social media, which, yes, that's a good thing because independent journalists primarily are on social media. However, of course, so is the mainstream media. They have unlimited resources. They are also not being censored like new media and alternative media voices. But I think it's also important for people to be aware of that there are actual like falsehoods being, put forward. Not everything that is contrary to the establishment is true. There is disinformation that is, I think, oftentimes, planted to discredit people. And sometimes people do get a little bit carried away. One example would be, and I know nobody wants to hear about the, virus anymore, COVID anymore. For example, we have there was some discussion about there being snake venom in the vaccines. Ridiculous. There's also another, and a lot of people get upset about this. There's also another theory out there that viruses do not exist. And I'm not a medical professional. I can't really speak to that, but I don't think that is really sensible. So I think that, we have to be careful of planted disinformation to discredit.
Yes.
And I would encourage people, you have to be active and not just passive. Do your own research, of course. I know that's a phrase that's thrown around so often now, but really, don't take anything at face value, really. You have to do your own research. And I think, and again, I have covered the COVID crisis quite a bit. And I know, as I said, people don't want to hear about this anymore, but that was something that I was very skeptical of and critical of, and got quite a bit of criticism for that.
Yeah.
But our duty is to the public as journalists to provide them with factual information. It's not to be well liked or to be comfortable either. So we have to
That's
be
so true.
comfortable being uncomfortable, I think.
That's so true. You
Yeah.
know, Taylor, the other day, one of the followers of Syriana Analysis, and he has been following this channel for quite a long time, and he told me in one of the chats, he said, like, Kevork, you're a beacon in journalism. You've been covering this geopolitics. I agree with you on geopolitics, but you really, I'm paraphrasing him. It's like you lowered your value when you spoke about the virus crisis back then. He thinks that I wasn't on point on this. And this is a point that I wanted to ask you here. Why do you think many ordinary people and some influential, actually, journalists with good and honest track record fell into the media manipulation regarding the pandemic? And how and when did you start to realize that there is something fishy about the script? I started to realize it 3 months. Like 3 months, it was already, I took the other position.
Hmm. Yes, another really good question and important point here. And it's not something that I've really talked about too much as far as like why I feel that some people fell for and are still falling for the establishment narrative on this issue. It really is perplexing to me, actually, because people who are otherwise very critical of, let's say, the DoD, the U.S., Department of Defense, the U.S. War industry, I think that a lot of these people don't realize that the vaccines themselves are considered in the United States military countermeasures. They were manufactured by the DoD. So it's interesting that people are critical, rightfully so, on the DoD, the US government with its foreign policy, but failed to recognize that we treated COVID, the virus, as a war. Look at Operation Warp Speed. But anyways, let me get back to the original question here. So I just want to make an overall point that, everybody deserves some grace, and journalists deserve grace if they make a mistake, if they weren't able to see clearly on an issue to begin with, and then they change their mind, if they, learn new information and then have an awakening. Let's say everybody should be given the opportunity to change their view. I also understand, and I'm like this myself, whereas journalists have niches, like they have their areas that they like to research. That's how I am. I don't cover everything. I cover specific issues. That's kind of like how I like to approach things. So not everybody's going to cover COVID, viruses, public health policy, and that sort of thing. But I think journalists generally were hesitant to comment on health issues and to comment on the science
Yes.
and the medicine. And I get that, because it is a difficult area to navigate when you're covering it, because who are we as journalists when we are not experts in the fields of science and medicine? How can we, counter somebody with an MD, a doctor, the scientist,
Yeah.
or biologist? So what I did was I spoke to the doctors and scientists who were being deplatformed, censored, and smeared in the
Yeah.
media. Because with all topics, the experts who are being smeared in the media are usually the ones that we should be listening to, or they at least deserve to have their voices amplified, and for people to be able to hear what they have to say. That's what science is all about, too. It's about
Yeah.
having disagreement and having discussions. So I realized something was very wrong also quite early on, when we saw, again, all of the media saying the same things over and over again. This is, a deadly virus. We need to flatten the curve. And then all this public health language that most of us never heard before or used before, it was becoming part of our common language, right? So that's when I knew something was wrong. And then when they said, 2 weeks lockdown, everything, I thought, this is so strange, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it, because I thought they are going to disrupt major industries in the United
Yes.
States. But in fact, what they did was they closed the local small business owner's business or shop, but they left open, let's say Walmart, for example, or these bigger corporations in their shops, they left open. So this is really hard on small businesses. And this was not only in my opinion, health event, but it was also an economic event. And I'll actually touch on that a little bit later here. But again, I think that so many fell for the left-right illusion as well, because that was very powerful when it came to people being critical of the of the measures and of the vaccines, because anti-lockdown protesters were considered to be right-wing or
Yes.
pro-Trump, and people who criticized this vaccine or injection were also considered to be, pro-Trump, right-wing, which, by the way, doesn't make any sense because Trump authorized the
Yes.
manufacturing of these injections or
Yes.
countermeasures. So it didn't make any sense, but I think that that is really what led to some of the some people to not really question or think critically about this issue.
Yeah, I would just show you one of the comments of our followers. He said, yes, you did lower your value over the virus. COVID is real and it needs to be addressed. And I just want to reply because I never said that COVID is not real.
Right.
I myself got COVID or whatever, call it whatever you want, 2 times. And it felt very strange compared to other type of flus that I had in the past. And the recovery was way longer. And I realized later that the level of the vitamin D, for example, in my body was not high enough for me to combat such diseases. And since then, I started getting my supplements, vitamin D, zinc, and the magnesium, and I do practices a lot. And when the second time I got the COVID, and it was very, very mild. Probably it was the virus milder, but recently also, for example, during the flu season, I haven't gotten any flu this year. Usually I do, right? So I'm not one of the people who say COVID is not real, but I am for the people to have the choice to get the vaccine or not. And I am, of course, against the lockdowns because, in my opinion, we have to see the cost and benefit of a lockdown, and the psychological impact on the people was tremendous, and the fear that this has spread among the people was tremendous, and the people can act upon their emotions when they are fearful, and also their immune system at least it doesn't get the boost when you are in a hysterical situation. And this is what the media did during this time. So I am for the freedom of the person to choose to get the injection or not. If you get it, and if it's a vaccine and it has to immunize you, then you don't have to care about me if I'm not vaccinated, right? This is how I see these things. And I also am a believer in a natural immunity, and I can see also that many people around me, they're all young. None of them have become seriously ill by COVID, and I see the point that older people were sicker, including my uncle. He passed away in the hospital. I don't know if it was the virus. I don't know if the protocols that they implemented on the people. I don't know all these things. I'm not arguing about these things. I'm just arguing that people have to have the right to choose what they want to put in their body, and this is a body autonomy. If you lose your body autonomy, you lost everything.
Mhm.
So here I would like to ask you this: do you agree with me that COVID was intentionally exaggerated to spread fear and hence normalize these draconian measures on the people with the intention of tightening control over the people?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I'm glad that we could, not just us, I mean, yeah, generally that we can discuss this and have these, conversations about it, because to say things like this a couple years ago, people really did find it absolutely crazy. But the point here, the way I see it, is that these public health professionals, in my opinion, they're not stupid. What they did, though, was that they went against every typical protocol that you would take in a situation like COVID-19. You would not, never, or at least in recent history, have people been healthy people, young people, healthy, have been told to stay in their homes. Have they shut down complete, total industries in order to protect some vulnerable people from a respiratory virus? So I
Hmm.
think that there had to be fear instilled in the people in order for them to accept the vaccine. And at that point, you have
Yes.
people who are traumatized, who haven't had much meaningful human interaction. They haven't been outside in fresh air with sunlight, which is also, as you said, very important for vitamin D and for one's health. And so people were desperate, and they were willing to take this injection, and they were willing to do anything just to get out of this bad situation. The public was
Yes.
told that if we could get the majority of people vaccinated, then we would no longer be in this perpetual lockdown. And I also just want to make a comment about the previous person's comment. And that is that, I too, I'm not saying that COVID doesn't exist. Some people think that it doesn't exist. I didn't say that. I don't think so. It probably does. And it probably could be really harmful on some people that may have some pre-existing conditions that are a little bit older. But for the majority of people, from the doctors, again, this is not my opinion, but the doctors that I've talked to, they have said this is not a threat to the majority of people who are healthy, fit, and that sort of thing. So I would, and I don't want to get into the scientific details, but I'm glad to just bring this up quickly. For those who are skeptical about this, I encourage you, please check out an interview that I did with a doctor. His name is Arne Burkhardt. It's on the LastAmericanVagabond.com. This pathologist was examining the autopsies and biopsy materials in patients who died shortly after vaccination. He also used a specific test in which he is able to show that with a high degree of certainty that the death or disease in the patient was caused by the COVID vaccine and not the virus. So if you're interested in that, if you're skeptical, or if you're not, if you haven't seen this yet, please go check that out. It's my interview with Arne Burkhardt. And I think it's really good, solid evidence about potential vaccine damage. But I also think, again, there's another component to all of this, of course, not only making people sick and making them perhaps dependent on the pharmaceutical industry for the rest of their life because they are so sick. But there was also a push towards further digitization. It's a hard word to say, digitization of society. And we now see, of course, the EU is putting forward these proposals, or I think it did pass this digital wallet. EU wallet. Yes. So that would hold, say, your medical information, like if you needed a vaccine passport in the future, for example, and bank information and all your personal details. Right now, it's said to be voluntary, but of course, that is right
It
now.
always starts voluntary. This is exactly where I wanted to go with you in this conversation. But before that, guys, it goes without saying that Taylor's X account, Twitter, and also her Telegram are both in the description below. And when we finish this conversation, Taylor sent me the link for this interview, and I will, guys, pin it in the comments below. So when you go to the first comment, you will see this. If you're interested, you can also watch this. And since you mentioned this digitization of the society, digital IDs, etc., my biggest concern during the COVID time was that there has been, they built a technological infrastructure that can be copied in the future, in future scenarios, right?
Right. Yes.
These IDs and passports.
Yeah. Before I comment on that, I do want to make one quick note about the interview. Thank you for, pinning it after the show. But the doctor who I interviewed is unfortunately no longer with us. He passed away about a month after we filmed, under what I consider to be a little bit of under strange circumstances. But again, it's still very unclear exactly what happened, but he seemed to have passed away tragically in a tragic accident. So I just wanted to put that out there. But anyways, okay, so yes, in Germany, because I was visiting Germany for a little bit when they had that full-on vaccine passport system. I couldn't believe it. It was really difficult to imagine it and then to see it, where you couldn't enter certain like restaurants or buildings without this vaccine passport, the QR code. It was terrible, absolutely terrible. And, of course, they had that with masks as well. But again, this can be used in the future, this infrastructure that has been built. And, so many people, and I understand this argument, will say, hey, look, COVID's a thing of the past. The digitization of society that we saw during COVID, that's something of the past. I don't think so, because if you look at what the WHO is doing, the World Health Organization right now is seeking to pass a pandemic treaty, which will supersede the member states' national governments during a time of a health emergency. And it allows for these vaccine passport systems to be implemented, and for mandatory testing. And this is not the right direction that we want to go. Again, as you said earlier, you don't have anything if you don't have bodily autonomy. And if you can't, it is coercion, of course. If you cannot access typical goods, services, resources, because of your vaccine status, that is not a world that we should strive to live in, and we should stop it. And yeah, I think that we need to be aware. We need to also resist these measures in the future and talk about it.
I totally agree with you. And this is where other types of speech laws are being enforced on the people. For example, one of which that you covered is the AntiSemitism Bill in the United States. And you said there is something equivalent in Germany about this AntiSemitism Bill. What is the nature, let's say, of this AntiSemitism Bill? Does it really combat anti-Semitism, or will they have an opposite outcome, let's say, in this regard?
Yes. So the House passed this Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. So this is in the United States. It is now going to go with the Senate. And essentially, it's very restrictive on one's free speech, but it is a resolution. And I believe that it will require for the Department of Education to consider a different definition of anti-Semitism, which basically means that any criticism, even of the state of Israel, would be considered anti-Semitic. It would also be considered anti-Semitic to say certain things like free Palestine or Gaza should be free. I mean, this is how I understand the bill at this time. And it is very restrictive on speech. And also, one thing that I really struggle to wrap my head around with this is that it seems to be very anti-constitutional.
Yes.
It seems to be very much in violation of the First Amendment. We have free speech, but this seems to really target one's free speech. And this was brought forward by House Republicans, who are always claiming that it is, the Democrats and the left that are restrictive with free speech. And that is true, but it's really both sides. And again, this goes back to this like left-right paradigm that just keeps people fighting with one another and at odds. But I really think we should, look at issues like this and not see it as a left versus right, but really, us, the people, versus this establishment and those who are in positions of control. But yes, this bill or resolution, as I said, has passed in the House, and hopefully, I would hope it would be stopped in the Senate. This is just going to further restrict people's free speech.
Yeah, I'm really not optimistic about that, to be honest with you,
Right.
especially with the amount of money that APAC is pouring in the American political landscape, and this hilarious profile, APAC Tracker, which I become obsessed with this page on X, Twitter. I just, every time I see a statement of an American official, I go to this page to see how much money they received from APAC. And it's crazy. It's crazy how much money they are distributing to the politicians. And how is this even legal in the United States? It's just beyond me.
Right. And on that note, too, I forgot to mention that this would prevent, in this resolution, it would prevent anyone from questioning a dual citizen, if they happen to be a citizen of the United States and Israel, questioning if they have more allegiance to Israel than to the United States, especially if they're in a position of power, which is, I think, a completely legitimate question. And then it also brings another question, which is, should people with dual citizenship of any country be able to be in Congress or have a position of or hold office in the United States? It's something to consider. And I say that as somebody with dual citizenship with the United States and Hungary. I mean, it probably is not proper for someone to have foreign citizenship. And you're not allowed to question that anymore under this particular piece of legislation. But again, it goes back to the other point that you raised, which is that I have, written about this before as it relates to Germany. Germany has a similar law in which it's actually criminal law, though. So this is a resolution in the United States. It's criminal law in Germany, where one cannot trivialize the Holocaust or the events of National Socialism that took place in Germany. There you see on the screen, I cover the case of Dr. Sutra Bhakti, and there's the case history. There's also their points 1 and 2. That is the law translated from German into English. As you can see, you can be prosecuted, you can be fined, and even go to jail for your words in Germany if you are to trivialize an act committed under National Socialism. And I think it's important for people to be aware that, like the situation here in Germany, which I covered of this doctor, it really wasn't, in my opinion, about anti-Semitism. And by the way, this doctor was found not guilty the same day of the hearing on both counts. It's really not about anti-Semitism. It was about discrediting a prominent medical professional who spoke out against mRNA technology, was informing the public, enlightening the public, and they wanted to discredit him, in my view, by being able to refer to him as a convicted anti-Semite. So I think we can expect that this will also happen in the United States, where dissidents are going to be targeted with, resolutions like this, so that they're seen for the rest of their lives as being a hateful person, as being a anti-Semite, and it'll be used to discredit people who are not anti-Semitic. And I think that it's just something to be aware of. That report, by the way, it is from last year, but the case is still ongoing. That is available at children'shealthdefense.eu, and it was on a German case that I covered.
It's crazy the amount of accusations of anti-Semitism, especially after the October 7 events, against anyone who just wishes that from the river to the sea, that everyone would live in freedom and peace and equal in front of the law, right? Like, you wishing that everyone who lives between the river to the sea to be equal, regardless of their religion or ethnicity or sect or. And those accusations are behind me, like they really used to bother me in the past. I know who am I know that I do my research. I know that I'm not an anti-Semite. I know that I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I know. So, but at the beginning, it bothered me. For a few years, it bothered me, especially when they come like organized mobs trying to smear you. During the Ukraine war, there were these NAFO trolls attacking your page and your reputation, etc. Nowadays, it means nothing. And for the people who want to follow, who want to learn, and who have mutual respect, even if we disagree, they are welcome. If you're not, then it's your problem, in my opinion. Now, beside the anti-Semitism law, we have another thing that we wanted to cover today, and that is the European Media Freedom Act. It seems very fancy, like there are so many freedoms in it, and it's about media freedoms. And how does this act impact our careers as journalists? Is it adopted already?
Well, it has passed the EU Parliament. It did receive quite a bit of pushback, but I always felt that the criticisms of this bill, while they were legitimate, the focus points of these criticisms were totally missing the point. And I'll explain why. And again, this was an article that I had written. It wasn't the most interesting thing to research, let me say, but it was necessary. So
Yes.
so the EU Parliament has now passed this EMFA, European Media Freedom Act. It was proposed by the Commission in September of 2022, and it has gone through the legislative process. I think it should be, fully implemented, within a year. I have to double check that though, so don't hold me to it, but I will double check after this call. But basically, it is marketed to the European people as a bill that is going to allow for the fostering of free and independent media from within the EU, and that it is going to be good for the media, good for the public. They'll have access to diverse viewpoints in the media, which is a total lie. Let me say they throw around this word media pluralism. Well, it's very restrictive, in fact, and it will not lead to more media pluralism. And a central point here, too, is that historically, the media has been left to be regulated by the member states in the EU. It was not left to, let's say, the EU, the broader EU government or the Commission to be monitoring the media. But that's exactly what this proposal does, or this new law does. And it seeks to centralize the entire EU media sector into a single market that is overseen by national regulatory authorities, as well as the Commission, through a new European board for media services, which is so Orwellian, but it's a European board for media services. It will include a member of the Commission. And again, everybody knows this, but just to make it clear the commission is an unaccountable, unelected body with too much control, and it will be their job to monitor the media. And this is a regulation, not a directive. And there has been some questions legally if the commission was even allowed to make such a proposal. And it seems that those, questions don't really matter at this stage, because this seems like it will pass. And I'm looking at the article now because I want to hit on a few important points here.
Yes.
But yes, so it establishes this European Board for Media Services. It is not independent, although the wording in this act says that it is an independent board. It is not. It's been criticized for that, and rightly so. And it will be the job of this board to basically monitor the media, and it will do so in consultation with the commission when requested by the commission to undergo certain tasks or provide information on certain media entities. It will have to comply, and it will also further restrict media access. So it will further restrict, say, EU citizens' access to media coming from outside the EU. So we already see right now censorship when it comes to RT, Sputnik, and Russian media organizations. You can't access them in the EU. And so we can likely see more of that, I think, in the future, because this gives the legal basis for further restriction. So again, nothing about media pluralism, despite what they like to say. And it will also put the very large online platforms, that's the term that they use, VLOPs, very large online platforms like YouTube, Rumble, Google, Twitter, TikTok, it will put them in the position of a publisher. So what will happen is that anyone, from how I understand it, anyone who publishes material online that is for the public consumption, so it's a very broad definition, any media service provider will have to engage in a contract with one of the very large online platforms before uploading, in which the media service provider would have to state that it is a media service provider as it is defined in the legislation, declare that it is editorially independent from the member states. Yet it's ironic because it will be completely dependent on the commission and this European Board for Media Services that controls it. And then it will also have to declare that it has a regulatory requirement or regulatory requirement, or I would call it a self-censoring mechanism in place, and then also provide the contact details of the relevant national regulatory authority. So in case a media entity were to violate or publish misinformation or is critical of the establishment, really, they will be able to easily contact the national regulatory authority to then discipline you somehow, and it will lead to restrictions, suspensions, and they can completely shut down certain accounts. I know this is already happening now, but it will be on a broader scale, I think, once this is fully implemented. And it is something that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, and they really should be, because this is not good for the public either. It's not good for independent journalists, any journalists, but it's also not good for the public, because then that restricts their ability to access truthful information. So that's the European Media Freedom Act. I'm sure, as you all hear, that it has nothing to do with media freedom.
There is lots of freedoms in it, basically, and I'm very excited about it, and I cannot hold my excitement to be deplatformed and cancelled very soon. And this is where I wanted to end this conversation with you, with the statement of Ursula von der Leyen in the last WEF meeting, when she said the biggest threat she said the biggest danger threatening humanity is not war, is not climate change. She said it's disinformation and misinformation. And this is something you see that there is a particular focus on. Like, they're all the time talking about misinformation and disinformation. And it seems that we are heading to more speech laws, deplatforming, closing bank accounts, digital currencies, IDs, and all this stuff, right? Why do you think the West, collective West, that they were preaching about the freedom of press and everything, they started doing, like, their behavior just negates their talks, right? Like, they started negating their own values, which was more about you're free in Europe, you can say whatever you want, and you can work, and you can be a journalist, etc., etc. What happened all of a sudden? Is it because that China is a big challenge now to them, and there is like centralized information system there that they are able to control what their people are watching, and they cannot compete really with China now, so they have to make it more centralized here in the collective West? Or what is it about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that they are fearful that people will have access to the truth because we've seen that information is more readily available, more accessible with social media. You also have, I think, a rise of independent media, people such as yourself that are reporting truthful, factual information. I think that the establishment does fear that. And so they're trying very hard to pass legislation that is able to target and further restrict information that is shared online that is critical to the establishment. It really reveals fear. It was actually Julian Assange who said that censorship reveals fear, and they had to, out of fear, in my view, they had to restrict RT and Sputnik at the start of this Ukraine conflict because they did not want people to have access to a different perspective on the matter. And so I think that their cover for this is to put out legislation like the European Media Freedom Act and to talk about media freedom and that it's important to them so that the average person who's not digging into these issues has this idea or this illusion rather that the EU is a force for good, that it does care about media freedom, that it is a central importance to the EU leadership. And they are also doing the same thing when it comes to, say, the digitization of society, as well as CBDCs, marketing to the public like it's going to be so convenient. It will not. Let me tell you, I want to make this point also that Augustine Parsons, the Director General of the BIS, or Bank for International Settlements, stated, we cannot track people when they're using print currency, physical currency. We cannot track them, but we can see what you're purchasing and control potentially what you are purchasing, what you're doing with your money if we implement a CBDC. So resist that. I say to people, please use cash. Please use cash. I know it's not so easy in certain countries. Hungary is actually very easy. A lot of places only take cash, but use cash. And then also too, another point, a little bit off topic for me here, but there's a lot of efforts right now to slam the banks. And I get that. The central banks, yes. But countries like Germany, for example, do better with many small local community banks that are accountable to that local community, that are also lending to small to medium enterprises or SMEs, lending to smaller businesses. I think we should be careful about this narrative of destroying banks, because what will happen is they'll destroy these small local banks and they'll keep the central banks. They'll then implement a central bank digital currency, but small local banks, it helps with the economy. Germany has a system like this. They have many small local banks. They have a great economy as well. Maybe things are changing a bit. I'm not an expert in this area, but I just wanted to end with some positive things and to give people some resources of what they can do with their time to help initiate positive change and stop, this dystopian future that we are getting very close to, it feels like. And then also invest and support independent media such as yourself.
Exactly.
And throw away the TV.
Yeah, guys, this is this was a brilliant discussion actually today. I'm very happy. One of the commentators said this is I will find it. Yeah, this is the Taylor the world needs to watch.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is not a financial advice, guys, but I think definitely whatever shape or form they're trying to promote and convince you to move to a digital centralized currency, that's a no-go zone. That's a seriously no-go zone. I don't want to give any financial advice.
Right.
I think I'm not an expert in this. I do believe that people more need to have a piece of farm, piece of land, more than like having this digital whatever they are trying to promote on the people, and grow up your food. So if you can, those would be really good start. Other than that, I truly think that the digital centralized currencies are meant to control your purchases, follow up your purchases, tax you when you are polluting the environment, and your score, like they're trying to your carbon scores.
Carbon score, yep.
They can cancel you anytime they want if it's purely digital and you don't have a cash in your hands. If you say something, I mean, it's not going to happen to everyone, to every ordinary person who has some opinion, but probably if you have 100 followers on X and you said something that bothered them, they could cancel you, believe me. And it's happening. And it happened in Canada. You saw with the crowdfundings, they closed their bank accounts. So this is the dystopian future that they're trying to impose on the people. But we have increasing number of people. We have brave journalists like you, and we have increasing number of people waking up. It was a big awakening also for me after COVID. And as I mentioned, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in so many things. However, I also believe that my health is my responsibility. I started eating healthy food. I started going to the gym. I completely changed my lifestyle, started taking my vitamins, starting to see some sunlight, and everything have changed to the positive. You cannot believe how much change you can make on your health, positive change, when you just follow these simple steps. Therefore, nobody on earth can convince me that lockdowns were meant for the general good and your health. In the contrary, I've seen the most hysterical and depressed people in my life during the lockdown times. So this is just, I wanted to make these comments at the end. Taylor, thank you so much, really, for dedicating your time and sharing your wisdom and your insight about all these complicated cases. And we will definitely have a chat again on Syriana Analysis soon. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Guys, and thank you so much for tuning into today's live streaming. I've been trying to catch up with your chat, and some of you were fighting. I don't know what's going on in the chat, but let's keep everything civilized. I know 99% of it is civilized, but I truly want for this channel to grow also intellectually among the people who are following and reading the comments and participating in the comments. That would be really great service to me as well. Tomorrow is going to be Thursday, right? Thursday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. We're going to do another live streaming, so stay tuned, subscribe to this channel, hit the like button. And if you want to support Syriana Analysis, an independent journalism work that I'm doing, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. Just a quick thank to Doni Non. Taylor, what's your thought on BRICS? Unfortunately, she left us, but I will definitely host her again and we ask this question. I promise you, Doni, about that. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Peace be upon you, upon your families, and I will see you tomorrow. Salam.